Hey guys, let's get more news about Steelers, but first, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. Cabally, Justin Fields bounced between spectacular and suspect during first day of training camp. The big story of the first day of training camp for the Pittsburgh Steelers was Justin Fields getting all the work with the first-team offense as Russell Wilson sat out with a calf issue. Wilson had previously participated at all of the practice sessions throughout the spring, and reports indicated that he was receiving the lion's share of the starting reps. That trend was likely to carry over into training camp as the offense races to get up to speed ahead of the season, so this was a welcomed opportunity to see Fields in action. He had a couple highlight throws that have painted a pretty favorable picture for his performance. The Athletic Steelers insider Mark Cabally pumped the brakes on that notion. Don't get fooled of what you see on the internet of a long pass. I mean, he did the same thing he did in OTAs, Cabally said via 93.7 The Fan. He looked spectacular at times. He looked suspect at times as well. I mean, that throw that you're probably seeing on the internet right now, the 50-yarder to Van Jefferson, it's 7-on-7, Dante Jackson fell at the line of scrimmage, so he was running free. Below is a clip of the pass that Cabally was referring to. Cabally pointed out that, while Fields did connect on a deep ball or two, that is what was expected from him. Fields' best two traits as a quarterback are his athletic talents with his legs and his ability to throw a pretty deep ball down the field. It is everything else, like the on-time throws, seeing the field properly, and the intermediate routes that need to show improvement. But he came right back and threw a ball to Pat Freiermuth that bounced 8 yards in front of him, Cabally said. And you're like, wait a second, is this the same guy? What is going on here? And you saw that a number of times. Consistency in his play will continue to be the biggest issue for Fields until he can prove otherwise. The pads aren't even on yet. It will only get more difficult to be consistent when the defensive line is applying pressure and he has to navigate the pocket. The only thing that has been consistent about Fields so far is his inconsistency. Cabally noted a very similar thing back in May when he said Fields sometimes looks like Ben Roethlisberger and other times like Mark Malone. To be fair, Steelers Depot's own Alex Kozora summarized Fields' play as solid in his Day 1 training camp diary. A solid overall practice from Justin Fields. Hung in the pocket, threw a pretty deep ball, went through his reads. Wasn't a spectacular day or anything, but I'd call it a good day for him. It is still early in the process, but how many more opportunities will Fields get to run with the first-team offense? The answer may be not many. If that is the case, then he will carry a lot of the same questions with him that he brought to the Steelers when he was traded to the team in March for a future conditional 6th-round pick. Fittipaldo, George Pickens might be the next guy out the door if attitude doesn't improve. Football is back for the Pittsburgh Steelers as they hit the practice field for the first day of training camp at St. Vincent College in Latrobe, and unfortunately with that first day back there is already some drama. According to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's Ray Fittipaldo, Wr. George Pickens and new wide receivers coach Zach Azzanni had a bit of a heated verbal dust-up Thursday in Latrobe after Azzanni got on Pickens following a rep, leading to Pickens coming back at Azzanni and eventually needing to be calmed down by fellow receivers. It comes as no surprise that Azzanni, a hard-nosed, demanding coach with plenty of experience in the NFL as a receivers coach, would be exactly who he has been throughout his career, demanding, not putting up with any crap and holding receivers to a standard, regardless of individual accolades, salary, reputation, etc. Pickens, unfortunately, found that out the hard way on Thursday. Appearing on the 93.7 The Fan PM show with hosts Andrew Filipponi and Chris Mueller, Fittipaldo stated that Pickens has got to see the writing on the wall right now that if he doesn't act in a more appropriate manner on and off the field, that he won't be getting a second contract from the Steelers, and that he won't be coddled in Pittsburgh any longer. Listen, George is a pretty sharp guy. He's got to see the writing on the wall, right? I mean, they got rid of Deontay Johnson because he was a problem. And George Pickens has to know that if he doesn't turn around his act and act in a more appropriate manner on and off the field this season, that he might be the next guy out the door, Fittipaldo said, according to audio via 93.7 The Fan on YouTube. Or, at the very least, he's not gonna get a second contract with the Steelers. So, I think George is smart. I think, after today, he probably realizes, if he didn't already know it, he is gonna be coached hard. This is a new offensive staff, it's not gonna be the same. And we'll see how this goes, but I thought that was a pretty interesting development that it happened today late in practice. It certainly was an interesting development, and it definitely isn't comforting knowing on day one of training camp that Pickens and Aiyuk are already clashing, simply because Aiyuk is coaching him hard. We don't know what exactly led to it, what was said, or what rep it was on, but we know, based on previous coaching stops and interviews with the media, the style that Aiyuk brings to the table. After dealing with some effort issues on the field from both Deontay Johnson and Pickens last season, and some flare-ups on the sidelines and in the locker room, the Steelers' course corrected this offseason at the position from a coaching standpoint, moving on from Frisman Jackson and bringing in Aiyuk. He has a great track record, and while he's had some verbal spats with receivers, he's always had their respect. That includes former Steelers and Broncos receiver Emmanuel Sanders, who once credited Aiyuk for getting more out of his career. The problem is, Pickens is in that early stage of the relationship with Aiyuk and has to adjust to his coaching style. Aiyuk isn't going to adjust who and how he is, because he's been there, done that. Pickens needs to be held accountable and coached hard, period. Thursday's spat might not be the last in training camp, or even this season. It's certainly going to be something to monitor, especially after reports surfaced that the Steelers got rid of Johnson via trade because they were tired of dealing with the headaches and didn't want him influencing Pickens. The Steelers already showed the willingness to move on from a standout receiver due to attitude issues, and if Pickens doesn't adjust, he might be the next one out the door. It's definitely something to watch here as training camp goes on. Like I said, this is a guy who was coddled in college, Fittipaldo added regarding Pickens. You can make a pretty good argument that he was coddled his first 2 years by Mike Tomlin and Frisman Jackson. And if his first practice today was any indication, he's not gonna be coddled by Zach Aiyuk and Arthur Smith. Hopefully Pickens got the message on day one of training camp and makes the adjustments. Steelers GM clears the air about WR trade rumors. The Pittsburgh Steelers have a very interesting wide receiver core at the moment. Other than George Pickens, who recorded over 1,100 yards receiving last year, there isn't a ton of depth behind him. Rookie Roman Wilson and veteran Van Jefferson, who has predominantly been the third wide receiver on the depth chart throughout his career, are the next two options. Even though there have been rumors about the team possibly looking to trade for a wide receiver, GM Omar Khan recently put those rumors to bed. Nothing ongoing right now, Khan said in response to a question regarding a potential trade for a wide receiver. One wide receiver that fans were hoping Pittsburgh might trade for is San Francisco 49ers star pass catcher Brandon Aiyuk, who recently requested a trade from the team. The Steelers could be a solid trade partner because they are both out of the 49ers division and conference, so San Francisco would not have to face Aiyuk a lot if a deal were to be made. But again, it appears as though Khan, head coach Mike Tomlin, and company are okay with the current group that they have in the building at the start of training camp. It will be up to players such as Calvin Austin III and Quez Watkins to also step up behind Pickens, Wilson, and Jefferson as training camp moves along. This makeshift group of wide receivers could be the key to quarterback Russell Wilson unlocking the potential of this offense. The wide receiver position in Pittsburgh might be one of the biggest X factors in the league at the present moment. And you, fan? What do you think of the situation of Brandon Aiyuk? Leave your opinion in the comments.